Hello, listeners. A slight caveat before I start the show. Unfortunately, Tony was fighting some technical gremlins, and you'll notice about 20 minutes in, his audio changes as he had to move devices. I hope this doesn't affect your enjoyment in listening. The Stathology must go on. Mic. Camera. Action.
If you're going to deal with him, you just got to make sure you don't end up owing him. Because then you're in his debt, which means you're in his pocket. And once you're in that, you ain't ever coming out.
I hear he's a good fighter, so I'm going to use him. But I'll be doing you a favour, boy.
What he means is, I'm doing him a favour. Because everybody knows nobody takes a dive in my fights, unlike his.
Here, Errol, I don't think he likes me. You don't like me, do you, boy?
Don't know what you mean. I do know. I can't wait to get out of here. Fuck me, it stinks.
I like my fights to finish prompt so we can get the punters out before the authorities find out. Now play your cards right and I'll sort you out.
You can sort me out by showing me out. It's hard enough to make a living in the boxing world. So every now and then you've got to do something that might not agree with your principles. Basically, you have to forget you've got any.
Are they Lancashire pigs?
Who the fuck's talking to you, boy?
Oh yeah, Tommy. Bricktop loves Tommy.
Now don't let me down. You don't want to let me down, do you, boy?
See you ringside.
Welcome back to the Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film from an actor's complete back catalogue, from past debut through to present day in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest to watch and discuss the next entry from the Focus Filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. For episode 2, I'm joined by not just one diamond geezer, but two. There's bullet-toothed Tony Farina and sweet enough Tonya Todd to discuss the second appearance of the Stath in Guy Ritchie's Snatch. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. So, Tony, Tonya, thank you so much for coming on the show so early into its existence. You are both mustard.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Oh, that's very exciting. I mean, when you put up the list, we were both like, ooh,
Snatch.
So thank you for allowing us to not have to rock, paper, scissors and having us both.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing. You already booked it, Tony, so thank you for sharing with me.
Happy to be here. Happy to have you, friend. It's always the three of us. It's always a good talk. So
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
At least for us.
Yeah, right. Everybody else is
like,
like those three again. Jesus.
There was a rush for a few, and there's a few that are still sitting there unclaimed. I'm gonna have to start twisting some arms soon, but this is definitely one which, I think if you guys hadn't got in early, there would have been a few others chomping at the bit to get into. So let's think about the film, but Jason Statham as well. Are you both Statham fans?
I'm not a fan, but I have followed his career. Like I like the stuff he does. He's fun to watch on screen, but he's not someone I follow. I don't know much about his personal life. But when he's there, it's like, oh, this will be cool.
Okay, yeah, he has that kind of cachet that you are happy to see him. I like that. Yeah,
Right.
Tony?
Yeah, no, this was my first Stath. I saw this one first, and then I immediately went back and watched Lock, Stock. So, yeah, I mean, so it's not like I've been like every movie he's in, but because I have a crush on The One as a film, like as a dumb film, like if it's one of those ones, it's like people call it a guilty pleasure, but as I've aged, I'm like, fuck that. I love that. Like I love that movie so much. Because it's parallel dimensions. It's something I love. Jet Li is a machine. Why
should you feel guilty about that?
Because
absolutely.
It's one. So when I saw them together in The One, that was great. So it's like, I saw that because it was a Jet Li movie. I love Jet Li. Like Romeo
Yeah.
Must Die was fucking amazing. And he's so great. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, there's that guy. And so that was it. Believe it, it wasn't this that made me stand up and realize who he was. It was his Jet Li movies that he did. And then, of course, when Expendables came out, he had solidified himself as a different guy than he was here, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So, yeah, and of course, the Meg was absurd, and I loved it so much. So I like that he's slowly become something different, and it's been cool to see his career evolve. Like, I love Wild Card too, and I know that everybody gets pissed because the marketing of all the action is in the trailer for Wild Card. The rest of the movie is literally them playing cards. It's a poker movie. It's a movie about Vegas. It's not about action. So people get super pissed. So,
I actually had a chance to meet him years ago because my boss was very involved with Planet Hollywood here in Vegas, and he would get invited to all these big events that they would do there. And the Expendables guys were all there, but I didn't want to be one of the twinks going out with the boss, so I passed.
That's fair.
Yeah, didn't Stallone own part of that?
Yeah,
and Schwarzenegger and Willis, right?
And Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I think Bruce Willis.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
They were all there. They're in those there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's funny how these moments happen. I think there's two ways of thinking, isn't there? I was passing through London Waterloo when they'd been filming The Bourne Ultimatum. So Matt Damon was there. So I was just passing through and there's a massive crowd and you're like, well, something's going on. I'll go and have a look. And he's there as people all crowded around him, like wanting their little piece, their little few minutes. And, it would have been very easy to get swept up and going to join in that. But I think seeing that kind of, that behavior made me step away. It would have been a cool story. I met Matt Damon today, but I can see like your thought process there as well. Like, I
wasn't an actor yet, so I didn't think this could be a good networking opportunity. It was just, I don't want to be one of the girls with the boss.
Sure. That's smart move.
Yeah. I'm the smart girl, not the pretty girl.
Well, calm down.
Hey, don't
You are can't you be both is what I would say.
Absolutely.
Why is it one or the other? Why can't you be I'm the smart pretty girl?
Well, that's what pretty girls like to hear.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I hear what you're saying.
And since I'm smart and not pretty, I don't need to hear it.
And we'll both just say
something
and
bad.
Back away really.
We're just going to stop talking. Yes, show's over, everybody.
So that's Snatch. See you for episode 3.
Stath is awesome. Yeah.
Yes. And not pretty.
Oh, he's very pretty.
He's handsome.
He's handsome.
Yes, handsome is a better word for it. It's true.
Yeah. He's rugged.
There are pretty men, but I don't think of him as pretty.
No, that is a fair shout. Yeah. He has a presence, doesn't he? Which
he definitely does.
Yeah. I hope we'll get to in this film because being only his second film, I think.
He definitely had a presence in this.
Yeah. And now, obviously, through the concepts of seeing him grow and seeing him change, as you alluded to, Tonya, before, like how he's become, he must be one of the best paid, most recognizable actors on the planet now, thanks to the kind of Fast and Furious roles, I would have thought, in Expendables. But seeing the evolution is really interesting. But from Lock, Stock to this is a massive leap in terms of his presence on the screen and his acting ability, which we'll get into in a bit more depth, I think, as we go. But already 2 films in, it's quite fascinating to see his evolution, his growth,
especially with so many big characters in this film. He was not meant to be the scene stealer, and I don't think that he did. There were plenty of scene stealers, but he still held his own as a more reserved character. Like, you remembered him, you paid attention to him, and a lot of his dialogue was memorable too.
He's the straight man, and that's tough.
But it was effective, even though there were so many shiny, happy people in this. Like, there are so many people that would grab your attention.
Yeah. Well, I think the straight man's always the hardest role to play because your job is to be unmemorable. And so because he is memorable, as you said, Tonya, shiny is the right
without trying.
Without trying, because Brad Pitt is the shiniest bit.
Right.
Talk about pretty. And this is like him at the height of his powers.
Yeah.
And he's got his, 9-pack, and he's got
that
where his whole body is saying, look at my junk. And you are like, okay. And here, and yet he's on screen with Statham and you're like, hey, that other guy's doing something amazing. So it is pretty impressive, like in the the way
the
that
fact that you notice someone else is on screen with Brad Pitt.
Mm.
Good job, other person. You know?
Yeah, that's for sure.
So you guys were coming to Snatch as fans already? You'd seen it before?
Yes, definitely saw it.
Many times before. Yes. It's
but glad to have an excuse to watch it again.
I know, darn. Just like, oh man,
actually
I gotta watch
on the
Snatch
calendar,
again.
booked, must watch this.
Yeah. I forget how much fun it is every time you watch it. You're like, it's one of those ones where, you know, some movies you rewatch and they're just like, oh, that's like soup. It just makes me feel good. And that's okay. You can kind of zone out or whatever. But this movie, as many times as I've seen it, it doesn't allow you to zone out. It's so fun and it knows what it is. Like I could just.
This is the first time I watched it after writing screenplays, and so I'm seeing it through a new lens of wow, this is really good writing. The pacing is so good. You're just sticking with it the whole time, and there's no getting a drink period. You know, there's no area where you'd be like, I can go get a drink for this part. Nope. You just suffer. You just keep watching, and then you forget that you even needed a drink because you're drinking up the screen. They were all so good. The performances were so good in this, even people I didn't know.
And the editor for the
win.
And
the music, the soundtrack. Oh my God. So good.
Yeah. So it's one of those ones you forget. You just like in your mind, you're like, oh, Snatch, so good. You know, love it for all the reasons. Then you're like, even Vinnie Jones. I mean, and I'm not one of the
I love him in this.
Yeah, he's great in this. He is. What I love is the way that you, in his flashback scene, where he's got the long hair and becomes Bullet-Tooth Tony, and then you cut to him in his suit with this hair. You know, it's like he's even making fun of everybody's image of him a little bit,
right?
Because he plays it really tight, and he's really like. He articulates very well, and it's not what you expect out of Vinnie Jones. So I think everybody's just so fun. I think, I mean, you want to talk about pretty people, Robbie Gee, who plays Vinnie. Every time he's on the screen, you're like, he's so charismatic, like, because he's always seems confused, right? When it's the three of them together, and then when other characters pop in and out, Vinnie's always like, and he's just so charismatic, and you forget, like, I don't know who Robbie Gee is, and I don't know what else he's in, but as like, again, he's in, I'm like, oh my God, that guy's amazing. Why isn't he a star? Look at him. He just like, so there's that. It's just, it has that kind of thing where everybody gets a moment to shine. And that is tough in a movie with 40 leads, for everybody to have a memorable moment that could, in somebody else's hands, or should have made them a star, you know, and whether actor's choice or whatever. So I just had such a fun time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you see, I watched a few behind the scenes stuff to prepare for tonight, and you watch some of these sometimes, and you wonder where that energy and that joy behind the scenes went, because you see the film and it's dour, or there doesn't seem much chemistry between. But I think here, what was going on amongst the actors, amongst the cast and the crew, and everyone was mucking in, and they were teasing each other about fines, and there was all this kind of, it was basically a group of blokes having a laugh, and then there was a camera on every now and then. And that definitely translates to the screen, I think, in this instance.
Yeah. I did read about the fines that to keep a tight ship. It was, you will show up on time, you will do your job, you will not screw around when you're on set, you know, because it could be too easy to just start wasting money on set, especially with a group like this. And
you know, it's 10 million. It's a significant rise up from Lock, Stock, which was something like 1.8, I think, or 1.3. So up to 10, so a significant rise, but also not really that big when you consider there is Brad Pitt, there is Benicio del Toro, there is Farina. These guys must be turning up for minimum wage for them in order to take a part.
Right, they just wanted to work with this guy, you know. It's like, who is this guy?
Yeah, well, I mean, Brad Pitt literally courted him, didn't he? He got his agent to give him a call and said, like, I've got Brad Pitt on the phone, he wants a part, and they had to figure out how that was going to work. So
yeah, since you don't speak English like we do.
Right, yeah, well, nobody speaks English like Brad Pitt does in this movie, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was English.
Yeah, how much of that do you know, Jack, in your research? Did you find how much of that is scripted? Like the Coen brothers, in every one of their movies, everything that seems like it's improvised isn't. So they, like, every don't you know in Fargo was written
and everything, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So they don't fuck around with there's no improvising on a Coen Brothers set. Like, don't fuck around. We know what we're doing. Trust us. And people do. But with this, I was just curious, like if you knew how much of Brad Pitt, because he's Brad Pitt, they're like, we just want you to mumble your way through some stuff. So as long as you say these words, it's from my mom. As long as you say that at the end of your ramble, we're good. Is that how he did it?
I think so. There's not any kind of official, but it feels like a combination, doesn't it? There's clear points he's got to hit, as you said.
It does.
The periwinkle blue, like we've got to hit that at some point, but go for it, like have fun. And I think, he really does, because he'd come into a lot of flack a few years before for Devil's Own, when he's playing like another Irish character. I think he's playing a bomber, isn't he? I think in that.
Yeah.
And he got a lot of like criticism for his accent, I think. So again, it was another chance to have a bit of fun. I think these are the moments when somebody like Brad Pitt, as famous as he is, shows you who he is, I think, and why he's managed to be such a screen and celebrity presence for so long, because he doesn't take himself too seriously. He'll turn up and do this silly role. I saw the trailer for that Lost City the other day with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. And I was like, what? Brad Pitt's in this as well, just like in a really small part. And he's turning up in Deadpool 2 for 2 seconds. And sorry, Tonya.
She doesn't know who he is.
I thought that was old enough. I apologize.
She doesn't know who he is. It's all right. You won't know.
So
this is why I stopped doing the Moon Knight stuff. It's like, you know what? I'll just wait until the end.
So I think like his star presence is really important, isn't it? And I think you have to let him go a little bit, definitely.
He had to fight for that, because for years people just saw him as pretty, because he's so incredibly good looking that it's hard not to notice that. He's blindingly good looking, so you can't notice the other stuff. But he's extremely talented.
Agreed.
And it was when he stopped playing pretty boys, that's when you realize, oh man, this guy can act.
Yeah, and it's not just that he's so charming too. That's the thing too, that's why you notice Statham. You mentioned Statham on screen with him. Statham's also really charming as fuck, and so that's why they can hold their own together. But that's it with Brad, is no matter what he's in, he outshines everybody. And I think Seven. His big year was when he did 7 and 12 Monkeys in the same year. And like,
I love both of those.
12 Monkeys was his better performance, right?
I agree. I think that's his best.
But what he was willing to do to himself is take a third billing in that movie. He's like, I just want to be in this movie. Terry Gilliam, I just want to be in a movie with you. Madeline Stowe is billed above him. And he knew exactly what he was supposed to do. They're like, we're going to shave your head. He shaved his head. We're like, we're going to put the shit in your face. He's like, all right, whatever. And so I think that says a lot of.
I think what Jack is hearing is Brad Pitt may be my next topic.
It'd be easy to do. I mean, he is insane. Yeah. And that the scene from that the Lost City movie, the trailer, the commercial I saw. Oh my God. He's like, right. Because you're like, oh, I'm going to watch it no matter what. Yeah. Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum and watch that movie. And then you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Who knew?
Like, they're just friends, right? He'll just show up for a song. And that's clearly what he did here. And it is, do you think, would the movie have worked? Would it have been what it was without him?
It probably wouldn't have made 80 million. No.
I'm not saying he's responsible for the success, but I think he was a definite ingredient. He was a crucial ingredient in the success of it. And so were many of the other people.
It's so good.
Like Benicio del Toro just comes in and steals the beginning of it,
Dressed up like a rabbi. That's so amazing. You forget too every time, because it's on the black and white screen. Like they go out of it so well shot, because he goes out of his way. Because that's him. At that point in time, he was famous enough. Everybody would know who Benicio del Toro was. Had he won his Oscar at this point?
I don't think he had won the Oscar.
He hadn't won yet. Okay. But he was a big enough star at this point where they're like hiding him in plain sight in that opening scene. You're like, oh, and then when you see it's him, you're like, oh, that's so fucking amazing. That was so cool. So well done. Inside, you show him only in black and white. It's amazing. What a performance. He was definitely having a lot of fun.
I think at some point, I don't know who wants to take it, somebody can have a go at trying to explain the plot. Anybody?
Oh, sorry, we haven't done that. Oops. Sorry.
But I only because we having a really good chat, and then we cycle back around to the start. So this might be a good place to do it. And I think what's really what I think is really interesting is the Guy Ritchie Tarantino comparisons, and they're kind of they're not the same, but they are clear to be seen. And I do think between these first couple of movies, they're both playing in that crime gangster world, aren't they? And
with an ensemble cast.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what I particularly like is more to do with their evolution and their growth. So like Lock, Stock is done on the cheap and done on the dirty, and it feels a bit raw, and it's Reservoir Dogs.
Right.
That movie was. Whereas this is a bigger budget. We've got some stars now. This is Pulp Fiction in terms of that natural progress.
And it boils down to good writing and great acting. Like all this sharp dialogue delivered perfectly.
Yeah, and in both cases, having one star say, "I'll be in your movie." So Harvey Keitel and Sting.
Now we are fucked.
Harvey Keitel read the script and said, "I want to do it." So that allowed them to get $1 million, which at the time, I mean, any of us, if we got $1 million, we'd be like, fuck yes. But $1 million for a film studio, they're like, whatever. But Sting was the same thing. Sting, while he's Sting, he's not like a big actor. He's fucking Sting. So Sting's like, I'm going to be in your movie. So we get it. So the comparisons are very easy between the two of them. And my question then to you guys, especially to you, Jack, as a big Tarantino fan, has that done Guy Ritchie a service? Does it hurt him? Are there like people out there who are like, Lock, Stock is just a cheap man's Reservoir Dogs, and Snatch is just a cheap man's Pulp Fiction, and because blah blah blah. So did they? I mean, they both just were luck. It's all luck. It's who you know. It's Harvey Keitel and Sting who really gave them their careers, in my opinion. They're both talented, but who knows?
And see, I don't think it's just luck. I think that they had to work to get within a network that would allow them access to these people.
That's totally fair.
They didn't just stumble upon them in a coffee shop. You know? That's luck. But if you develop relationships with people who will eventually introduce you to people at this level, that's hard work. That's not luck.
That's totally fair. What do you think, Jack?
Well, I see your point, Tony. There is an element of like right place, right time. But I think to back Tonya up, like Trudy Styler actually was the one who discovered Guy Ritchie. She saw his short movie and she was really impressed by his work. She sought him out, and this is for Lock, Stock, obviously. She then read his script for Lock, Stock and said, "It's something special about this, but it needs some work." And that's how this all started. So obviously, that's how Sting got to know Guy Ritchie, and how Sting ended up wanting to be in the movie. So yeah, there's kind of a mixture of those two answers and those two worlds, I think.
Right, true, because she's a film producer and writer and director in her own right. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's amazing. Okay, cool. But I just see, because you were just saying there was that comparison, so it just was another layer of comparison that you get a big star to be in your movie. I mean, Tim Roth became a star. Like, we think back, like, oh, Tim Roth is in Reservoir Dogs. Michael Madsen was in Reservoir Dogs. Steve Buscemi. They're stars because of being in Reservoir Dogs. You think back that they were stars showing up in there. Chris Penn was the only other one with Harvey Keitel who had much of an IMDb page, right? So in this, it's this.
Yeah, it's true. It's a similar story here, isn't it? It's a similar story in terms of, you look at Lock, Stock, and then the cast there, mostly unknowns, guys who went on to have big careers. Dexter Fletcher as a writer director now, and you look at Snatch, it is a big step up. I think what I like is that Guy Ritchie acknowledges it. I think he's happy to have those. I think after this film, the comparisons go away. I think it's only for these two films, and he's happy to have them, as I guess most people would be. And I think what he does, in terms of Tonya's been talking, like the writing, he even acknowledges it in this movie. So in that scene with Benicio del Toro, when they're going to do the initial diamond heist, they're talking about the Virgin Mary, which can only be a reference to like a virgin from Reservoir Dogs, right?
It absolutely
for sure. Yeah.
And then we get the added trivia of, we have the Madonna song playing later in the movie. And
absolutely.
Hey, who does he marry later?
Not much too later either, to be fair. Hopefully she gave him his money back for licensing the song.
And then she took it again after they split up.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. Yeah, like a loan. I'll have that back again.
Yeah.
All right. So somebody, I'll let you guys fight it out, needs to give us a very concise plot synopsis, just in case there's somebody listening that is interested in what we have to say about a film they haven't watched and they're at this point completely confused. Fight it out amongst yourselves.
1, 2, 3, not it. No,
silence speaks volumes.
No, I'll do it. Okay, so the plot is actually pretty straightforward, believe it or not. I mean, for convoluted as it is, as many characters, the plot is essentially there's an 86-carat diamond on the loose, and everybody wants it. Period. That's the MacGuffin. It might as well be called.
That's better than what they have on IMDb.
Right.
It is, yeah.
It could just be called the MacGuffin diamond, and that's it. So the thing is, there's this diamond out there, and Turkish and Tommy, played Turkish is the Stath, is our narrator, is telling us the story of how he ended up where he ends up at the beginning of the movie, and we don't know that until the end. And so it's essentially, this is about 2 days of time over the course of, like, nobody sleeps for 2 straight days, and everybody's after this diamond, even though they don't know that they're after the diamond. There's lots of money, there's lots of gangsters, there's lots of gambling and fighting, literal fighting, like boxing promotion. But the whole point is everybody's after the MacGuffin diamond, and wackiness ensues. The comedy of errors is really what it is.
Yeah, for some of them, definitely.
How do you feel about the motivation in this film? It's something which I found out watching this so close now to Lock, Stock and trying to be more critical and analytical of it. I feel like it's something for me that doesn't work quite as well here as it did in Lock, Stock. I feel like in Lock, Stock, the characters are motivated by a need. I know at the start they want to win money by playing poker. So it ultimately is about, accruing a better financial position there. But I mean, the rest of their need in the rest of the movie, it's about a need, right? They have to get out from under the crime boss. Whereas this one, it feels a bit more like everybody other than Turkish and Tommy are driven by greed. What do you guys think?
Some of them aren't even driven by greed. Like, Brad Pitt's character isn't driven by greed. He's trying to provide for his mother. But it's not a need. It's just something he wants to do. It's like, all right, you're asking me to do something. Take care of my mom. And then Bullet Tooth Tony, that's not greed either. It's just a job. He's just doing his job.
Man with principles, isn't he?
Right. The gentleman assassin.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, because to me, because Freddy Four Fingers, it's not greed for him. That's Benicio's character. He is motivated by his addiction. And, there's a lot of power involved here. And then, what's the diamond broker's name?
Doug the Hat.
Yeah, Doug. Yeah.
Or Avi.
Well, Avi is his cousin, right? Or his brother? Yeah.
I think it's his cousin.
Yeah,
or Doug the Head.
Doug the Head. Yeah, so Doug the Head is, again, that's what he does. He's a fence. He brokers and diamonds. That's also his work. There is definitely some greed involved, but it's like these are just dumb people all doing dumb things. You know what I mean? You're right. Turkish and Tommy, they're just trying to be boxing promoters. And, everybody else is, Bricktop is clearly motivated by greed. I mean, he's only a boxing promoter so he can get people to take dives so he can win money on the back end of the sports book. He's not actually trying to promote boxers. They're trying to do anything the right way. So there is a lot of that, but I just think they're all very incredibly selfish. I think the motivation across the board isn't greed necessarily, it's selfishness. And you could see that.
And then the dumb criminals, like the trio of idiots, they eventually, their motivation is to stay alive.
Yes.
It's no longer about the greed. It's we just don't want to die,
Well, and their whole thing, I mean, to me, they're the comedy. Like, they're so funny, those three guys. And the thing about them is, right, at first, they don't really even want anything to do with it. They come, they come to them. The Russian comes to them, right? And is like, do this thing. And you're like, oh, shit, they didn't ask to be involved. But then once they're involved, now they're just terrified. So fear is a motivator for them, too. Like I said, Tonya, they're just trying to stay alive. And they're so funny because that's, again, I bring this up in most things I realize as I listen back to some of the shows. I'm like, my God, I talk about this movie all the time. But there's that whole, we're not even supposed to be here today, Dante thing from Clerks with those three guys. Like, they didn't want anything to do with it at all. But there they are. so might as well deal with it now.
My favorite bit of trivia about this is that all of their mistakes are taken from like true crime situations where people screwed up. They didn't even concoct these idiocies. They took real stupid people and take their crimes and put them on screen.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
I think they were my favorite on this watch through. I think they were my favorite segments. I was really drawn to them this time, watching these three guys like calamitously make their way through situations they keep, like as you say, finding themselves in that they don't know how to resolve because they don't have the skill set. They're not made for this. Yeah, that bit really held up really well. I was obviously I knew where it was going to go, but you're sort of hoping they're going to win out in the end.
Oh, you do root for them, don't you? That again is a skill.
You do, yeah.
That's such a skill.
Root for them to not die.
Yeah.
Oh, they're fantastic because they are genuinely friends too. I think what I like about this movie, and this is something that Tarantino doesn't do. I mean, if you're going to talk about comparison, but I think what Guy Ritchie does exceptionally well in his Sherlock Holmes movies is he, like the way that Jude Law and Downey Jr. play Holmes and Watson as really good besties.
There is that difference. His characters have friendships where you always are wondering who's going to stab whom in the back with a Tarantino film. Like you don't trust, with the exception of Pulp Fiction, there's a real partnership there, but
yeah,
you think that these people are all going to stab each other in the back at some point, where with Guy Ritchie films, there are true friendships.
Yeah. And I think it really comes to a head in the car scene when they're all in different cars and they're all bickering with each other inside the cars, but there's like real loyalty and an honor there. And that's what about the three doofuses. They're so great because they're just pals and they're giving each other shit for just because that's the kind of friendship that they have. But
and their critiques are on point.
They are. They're totally honest with each other. Yeah.
They're all being stupid, but they're calling each other on how stupid they're being.
Yeah. And I think you believe it. You believe, and again, for your saying, Jack, like these are, I mean, yes, you got bigger names in this, but it's still like a lot of just dudes who are acting. You know, they're all just showing up. And like you said, behind the scenes, they were all having way too much fun, which comes through. But like you believe Turkish and Tommy are friends. You believe there's a whole backstory to them and how Gorgeous George becomes their boxer. Like you get it. You're like, oh yeah, I know that story. I don't have to see it, but it's shorthanded there. And the three idiots, you're like, oh yeah. That all makes sense. Love them. Get their story. Like you could have backstory comic books about these guys if you wanted to, but it's just there, and it's in the chemistry of whoever the casting director was. You know, did an excellent job putting the right people in the room together.
Agreed. Well, speaking of casting, this time round, obviously Guy Ritchie and the Stath have bonded on Lock, Stock, and he wrote Turkish for the Stath, which I think is, you know, we've mentioned it briefly before. I think is fascinating in terms of his evolution and the amount of trust that he put into him to lead this movie. I know we're talking. There's a lot of characters, and there's probably fairly equal screen time, to be fair. But he's the ostensible lead, isn't he? He narrates the movie.
He's the protagonist.
Yeah, I guess we'd argue he is, and I think Ritchie's faith, I hope you guys agree, I'm going to you'll tell me in a second, I think his faith is rewarded in Jason's performance in both on screen and in narration, particularly because I know, Tony, you're not a massive fan of narration all the time.
I am not, but it has to be done right. And it is done right here because he's telling us a noir story. So I'm okay with narration in a story where it makes sense. And so I think because there's so many moving parts, you need it. And I think you're right. I think it does say a lot about Jason's acting ability and their friendship and relationship and how he's seen him grow. And I think, you know, you mentioned that, you know, he did some work. He wasn't one of those guys. I mean, he was not an actor before, but he also put in the effort. He wasn't just going to show up and be like, I'm in Lock, Stock, and now I'm going to be in all your movies, and I'm not going to take the acting classes and put the time in and study. I mean, look at these people who are around him too, that he can ask.
Yeah, he looks relaxed on screen. He looks like he belongs there.
Yeah. So I think the voice, you are right, Jack. I don't love voiceover all the time. I think sometimes it's super out of place.
And sometimes it's a cheat.
Yeah.
But it wasn't here. It was part of the storytelling.
That is exactly it, Tonya. That's exactly it. It's like the times, and what always bugs me is when they'll use it at the beginning and then again at the end of the movie, but then you don't continue on with the conceit. You're like, no, have a narrator or don't have a narrator. Like, the reason I love The Wonder Years is because the original and the remake, the narrator is a character. He's there commenting like he's watching the documentary of his life, and he's commenting on everything. He's always a constant presence there. So it works.
So you don't hate it. You just usually don't love it because it's not typically done
It's
well.
not. It's rarely done well. That is exactly.
And I can definitely get on board with that.
Yeah, and it's done perfectly here. But you're saying he wrote it in, right, Jack? He wrote a narration as opposed to them adding it after, like in Blade Runner, where they're trying to explain things to a dumb audience. Right.
Yeah.
And that's it right there. And they use it for character development, just explaining the name. We don't need to know that for this story at all, but it's still interesting, and it just speaks to the type of character he is.
There's a dryness to the delivery, I think, which we haven't really seen from Jason Statham since. A few of the things I read online, the people that want to praise his performance are about how he's quite dry, and he's a straight man, but he has a sense of humor about his character here too, and I think that comes through in the narration as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what I like about this too, and as you're talking about the evolution of him as a character, as a character actor too, is that in these first two movies, he's the lead definitely of this movie, but he's not a tough guy yet. I think the reason that his dry acting works so well here is because that is one of Turkish's defense. Turkish works in boxing. He's around tough guys all the time. Tommy's carrying a gun. George is this big brute. He's the brains, air quote, of the organization. That's not saying much, but he's not a fighter. He's a thinker, not a fighter. So I think his dry performance is indicative of the character he's playing, which is a smart guy, as opposed to like.
And he's still impressive because he's not panicking. He's not, he's not peeing himself in these situations where he's about to die.
Yeah.
He's very aware of the danger, but we also don't think, and he's going to jump up and clock somebody, because he's not the tough guy here, but he does have balls of steel in some of these moments.
I think the moment when he goes into his, I don't know what you call it, like his arcade, I would call it an arcade, when he's got all the gambling machines, when the guys are smashing up, is a really key moment for what you guys are talking about here, where he's keeping his cool, he's getting his bat out, he's trying to think about saving his business.
He's going to go down fighting.
He's going to go, yeah, absolutely. And then the bat gets taken out of his hands from off camera, which is a really cool moment. And ordinarily, the transporter Jason Statham, the Expendables Jason Statham, suddenly starts kicking ass and taking names and flying kicks and
becomes the action star.
Absolutely, yeah. But here, the next time we see him, he's pinned to the floor and he's clearly, been knocked down quite easily.
And then he's saved by the pretty boy.
Right. And I love that scene. I think that is done so well, because it says a lot. Like you said, he is cool. There's that whole thing when Tommy's like, "Why are you so fucking calm?" And he's like, "Oh, we're gonna die no matter what." Like that scene in the arcade is it's its partner to that other scene in the caravan where they're like, well, this is he knows who he is. That's the thing. You talked about, Tonya, about how comfortable he is. This is where the Stath shows how calm Turkish is. Who Turkish knows who he is, and that is the performance Statham's giving. I mean, there's only so much writing Guy Ritchie can do with directing. Statham has to show us he's this guy, where the guy who's playing Tommy, he's all keyed up and all the time. And so it's like, well, that's the performance he's giving, so we know everything about him.
Yeah, and it's such an honor to have someone write you into their script, like write a part for you.
Yeah.
He showed up, he delivered.
He did, and he did not let him down. And I think you get why then, he gets a career. You know
how you watch these movies and you're just like, why is this person in this film? You just don't get it. That was not the thing for him. Like, you knew it was centered around him. He belonged in this world. The character was authentic. Or at least he felt authentic.
Agree.
He belonged there.
And the other person this could have been, of course, and we've mentioned him before, is Vinnie Jones. Like, I don't know how well you know him, Tonya, but he was a famous footballer here for Wimbledon.
Yeah, I think he's adorable.
Crew called the Crazy Gang, for their antics on and off the pitch. Very famous for a photograph, if you've seen it, of him grabbing another player's genitals. I was trying to think of the right way to put that, and that's how I'm going to go with.
Did not know that.
yeah, that's like one of his most famous moments. And actually, I don't know if you read the trivia for this, one of the behind the scenes stuff in this was that he couldn't turn up to filming one day because he'd been arrested the night before, having got into a pub fight. So this is who Vinnie Jones is.
Was
fair. Okay, good point. Yeah, is at the time, yeah. But he totally turns up as well, and he's not phoning it in. And you see him in the behind the scenes stuff as well. He's taken it really seriously. It's like, this is a new path for me. Guy's shown faith in me. I need him to guide me through this. I'm still learning. And I think that we spoke about the fun vibe on set. That clearly was there. But also everybody wanted to do the best job they could do as well.
I think that he is also very charming on screen. I don't know about him as a person, but there's just something about him on screen you want to watch. I was sad when his scenes ended. It's like, this guy is fun to watch. I like the way he talks. I just want to hang out. I just want to be with this guy for a while. Just watch what he does. Extra points if he's kicking someone's ass while he's while he's clipping, The scene where he had the gun on him, it was like, yep, this I paid to see this right here and didn't even know it.
Oh, right. Yes. When it's like, your gun says replica. That's in, my gun says Desert Eagle 5.0. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. He just delivered that so well. It's like, this guy isn't even an actor. I mean, he is now, but at the time, I think he was pretty new, wasn't he?
This is his second performance. Yeah, absolutely. Same as Jason Statham.
Yeah, they both did the two Guy Ritchie films. And you can see, and again, you see it though, because what they both bring, it's interesting to see the trajectory of their careers too. And it's because Statham was also a professional athlete, but he was a diver. He wasn't as famous as Vinnie Jones was before he started acting, and so it's like, but they both use their grace.
But you're thought of less if you're an athlete first and then you start acting, people assume you cannot act, where that's different from being an unknown, where you'll give this person a shot.
No, that's true. You're right. Yeah, because but what they both show is that I think you don't become a professional athlete if you're not a hard worker, if you don't put in the effort. But you're right. There's that perception of, you're a meathead. Well, that is 100% not true. And I mean,
right.
So I
and the Juggernaut does not do anything to help with that.
He did exactly what he was asked to do. I love him as the Juggernaut. I mean, people give him grief for that.
I'm not saying he didn't.
Yeah.
Those bad choices were not his.
He is the Juggernaut, bitch. That's all I'm saying. Yes, I understand. But again, I think even in that film, I mean, it's easy to make fun of him because that film isn't very good, but it isn't terrible, and it's not his fault that the movie's not any good. He showed up. He's like, I'm going to be the Juggernaut. I mean, what a cool thing.
I was excited it was him, and then why? He's not even a mutant. What are you doing?
I just think I'm just so impressed. And I think what Tonya just said about both of that, about Vinny, it translates into Statham. You just see them working. You see them saying, this isn't a joke for me. And you can tell those people who, they get like Ezra Miller. Let's talk about a guy who's got immense talent and it's fucking nickel brain. That guy can knock it out of his own way. And it's like, dude, you're charming.
And that easily could have been the case for these guys.
Exactly.
No, they showed up, they did their job, they took it seriously.
Yeah, because they didn't want to be a joke. Like you said, they had to work extra hard because people were like, athletes, what do they know? They can't act, blah, 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 whatever. But they both have had careers out of it. And Statham, obviously, more successful than Vinny as an actor. But here you are. He's got his own podcast. I don't know if you know how famous Jason Statham is. He's got a show about him. We're on that show right now. Very meta. That's how famous he is. But it's like, but again, it's the work. They chose to knock it out of the way. And it just, I think, and again, Tonya, you're an actor. Jack and I write, you write. We all want to be in the arts. We know that that's hard work. We know that doing something artistic takes a skill. And you can just back into it and be.
And it takes discipline.
Which shows up in a movie like this. It's a hot mess in the wrong hands, the wrong actors. This movie would flop and everybody's career is over except for Dennis Farina and Benicio del Toro. Everybody else's careers are over, right? Brad Pitt. But it doesn't.
Although some of that is Guy Ritchie.
Right.
Like he kept a tight ship. he made sure that they stayed on course.
Right.
But it helped that you have all these people on hand who are doing their part.
Yeah. And it worked. I mean, I think, and I'm assuming that's part of this series for you, Jack, is, I mean, my question to you is, how much does Ritchie deserve the credit for Statham's career? Because his first two movies, he's not the action star that he becomes. He doesn't get the opportunity to go on and be the action star and be in the Jet Li movies and do this other stuff if these movies don't happen. So is it that? I mean,
I don't know. That's like saying Kenneth Branagh he's responsible for the success of Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston. He gave them a shot. They're the ones who had to do something with it.
I think Ritchie put him in the position where he has, he's given him that step forward, hasn't he?
Right.
I definitely think
he opened the door, but
it.
only you can walk through it,
Because he could have just, if he was going to be the Guy Ritchie, Jason Statham, he wouldn't be the guy which we're going to go on and talk about, which is the action star. And that was all him, right? That was him saying, I want to do this kind of movie. I have this skill set.
I want to take my career in this direction.
I'm a martial artist. You guys don't know this about me. And that's what he's become. Yeah. So I know what you're saying, Tonya. I think Jason Statham, him and Guy Ritchie are still good friends now. They're still making films together now. His first two films were working with Guy Ritchie. His latest two films with the new one that's coming out is working with Guy Ritchie. So clearly they're still close. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to say, I owe this guy for giving me a chance.
Yeah, a chance, but it doesn't make your career.
That's fair.
Definitely a leg up, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and they all came through. I mean, again, it's Guy's first two movies, it's Stath's first two movies, it's Vinny's first two movies. I mean, so you're right, they're all coming through it together, but I just think it's a testament to, like you said, it's Statham's choice to be like, I'm going to be the action star because I can be, because I have the physicality, because again, I was fucking Olympic level diver. I can control my body. So of course, martial art makes perfect sense. And I'm glad he's made that move, but I would also be okay with if he had followed, a different career where he is just a charming, charismatic, character actor who would, I'd be okay with that too. Cause I think I can, and he still shows up and does those occasionally where he's not just a beefcake guy. Sometimes he shows up and still like, just a reminder, because even Wrath of Man, which is amazing and is uber violent, it's not The Transporter.
No,
it's not Crank. It's nothing is, but it's like, and again, he's back with Guy there, and it's that subtle, reserved acting performance, but he's still gonna, it just gets to be a little more violent. He gets to be a badass, where in Snatch, he's not. But I love it. I love seeing, I mean, this is such a great idea for the show, because again, we know, and like you said at the top, Tonya, you're aware of him. You've not seen all 42 of Statham's films, but you've seen probably 10. You know enough to get yourself in trouble. I'm really impressed. This, because like you said, we're looking at this now with a critical eye. We're not just talking about Snatch. We're talking about.
He's at the point where he's a bonus if he's in a film, but he's not the reason that I see it.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure. But what I loved going back and looking at this, thinking about what I know about him, I've seen way more of his movies than you have, Tonya, obviously. Because I will seek out a movie if I see him in it. I'm like, if he's the lead, like Wild Card, I'm like, that didn't even get released in the theater. Like, hey, there's a Statham movie. I'm going to watch that. And so he's a draw for me. So, but to look back critically and to think who that guy has become and who he was here, it's so impressive. I'm really, really impressed with this early performance. I just can't get over it, especially him being surrounded by these big, over-the-top performances that all these other big.
Yeah, I didn't know it was only his second performance. It's even more impressive.
Yeah. I think what you've both spoken about earlier, and obviously Tonya, for you from that personal perspective, you are coming from a very different place for Tonya and I, but I think him holding his own in scenes of Brad Pitt, him holding his own in scenes with Alan Ford as Bricktop, who, between him and Brad Pitt basically steal the film. I think, as you said, like Tonya, to be able to still notice Jason Statham in those scenes and to see his process and, be able to see what he's doing in order to stay present and for his character still be important, I think really shows his growth, because Dan and I noted how he had charisma in Lock, Stock, and you noticed him, but he was generally, he was there. He wasn't present in the scene, other than Dan made a really insightful comment about how in the last scene of Lock, Stock, and it may have been a reshoot, suddenly he had a bit more of the Stath about him. And Dan said this really nice thing about how like he was Jason Statham in Lock, Stock, and then you suddenly saw the Stath starting to come out. And I think we're seeing that growth here, like massively.
The confidence. It's probably the confidence built from doing this successfully.
Yes, agreed.
Do you guys feel like you've got is there a scene? I mean, we've mentioned a few, but is there a particular scene that stands out for you where we can see the start of this, we can see this confidence coming through, we can see the start of this evolution for him?
I liked the scene where he went to check his safe,
where
he was going there, and then it's like, oh, I am not alone, and I have to just play it cool, and the whole cup of tea thing. And I thought that was the uber cool moment of this movie for him, because he should have been peeing himself. He was in a lot of trouble, but he didn't act like a little wimp. He didn't start lying and scrambling. I know that's part of the character, but he was believable. He was believable, as even though you don't have any of the power in this situation, you're just going to stand there and talk to him like he's just a person. He's
going to own his personal space of power, which is like, if he's going to be killed, like die of dignity, or die like still being the man he is. Yeah.
There isn't anything I can do to change the situation I'm in. So I'm just going to stand here and have the conversation. There's no need to panic. It won't change a damn thing.
I love the moment at the scene. I think it's a great pick. I love the moment in that scene where, like, right towards the end, and Bricktop's done his talking, and then he moves the picture and reveals the safe, and he's like, so now you're going to pay me back. And there's a look that comes upon Jason Statham's face, Takesh's face, where he's just like, oh, I thought I was going to get away with it. It's brilliant. Yeah. What about for you, Tony?
And it didn't need words to convey.
No.
Yeah, it's the cards. It's the card scene. Because George can't talk at that scene, and so Tommy, who buys the gun to give himself the confidence, right? And so that whole
Germans.
Yeah. It's so fun. Tommy's such a great character. I mean, that is such a great performance too. But like, so the card scene when they're sitting there and he's just explaining, and again, it ties into what Tonya saying about how cool he is. He's like, look, it's either going to be this and this and this, or we're going to be that, or this and this happen, or we be that, or we won't. And so he's like, he knows he's either going to be alive the next day or he is not going to be alive. And there isn't I'm going to be on the run. He's not a fool. He knows he can't get away from Bricktop. There's nothing he can do. So he's either
we're not going to beat him.
Right. Yeah. And they don't. That's the best thing, is they don't do it. Like, everything is half-assed. And so everything he says in that card game comes to fruition. We're either going to be alive or we don't. And there's nothing we can do about it. And so I love that that's a little, prescient, and it's a little, here's a clue for what's going to come later in the film. And I didn't really, as you're just thinking about it more critically, as you're, like I said, watching it for this, that I was like, oh, that's so tight. That's so smart, because it tells you exactly how the movie is.
They're in these terrible situations, and you can, at their core, he and Tommy are still good people, because when Mickey clocks the guy at the end of that fight, which we were all hoping would happen, even though we know it really should not happen. What'd they do? They tried to save him.
Yeah.
They grab him. They didn't just run out like, oh, he screwed us over, we're out. No, they took him and they tried to save him on their way out.
That's a lovely point. And that's why they're the ones who come out on top, I suppose, by the end of the movie, isn't it? Because they've earned it. They've done it. They've got that moral center, which was another thing Dan and I spoke about with Lock, Stock, was that the characters with the best morals are the ones who they don't win, because they've still had to go through what they've gone through. And then, Lock, Stock is a little bit more unclear about what's going to happen for these characters in the future. But I think, that the morals are important to the center of
they were never considering slicing open the dog. They say, they cared about the mom dying. They didn't directly hurt any of these characters or try to hurt any of them. They were trying to keep everyone alive, even when it went against their own benefit, because they really should have just been like, we're out, you screwed us over, see you, Mickey.
I mean, twice, to be fair. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But no, they had him between them because he was all messed up from the fight, and they didn't need to say it. That was the smart writing. They did not need to say, and we're saving him because we're good people. No, they just showed it, and it was a beautiful moment. And then he's like, yeah, I'm fine. See you guys.
It's so good. And you see the moment when Mickey knows they're going to do that for him. Like Mickey knows he can take the beating, and then ultimately he knows Mickey's trying to do them a favor, but he also knows when they show up at the place, and he's like, oh, and Turkish says, Mickey, I'm really sorry about your mom. And he's like, well, you didn't do it. Like, you got nothing to be sorry about. But he's like, and Turkish doesn't like argue with him. He's just like, he's truly empathizing. He knows how much he loves his mom. And so there's that moment there where that's when Mickey knows what kind of person Turkish is. He doesn't have to drive out there and just give his condolences. And he's like, look, man, if you don't want to fight, we're going to die. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens. If you want to help.
He did have to drive out there because he still needed to ask him to fight.
Right. But he also knew that Mickey could say no and that would be okay. Because at that point he had come to that. Right. He had to try, but he also wasn't there to pressure him. He wasn't going to threaten him.
He felt like a jerk even asking.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It was like, this is our only way to get, for us all to get out of it. And of course, the best part is that the Pikes, as they call them, are the smartest people. And they're the ones who outsmart everybody. And it's such a great turn because you don't see it coming. Poof,
vanish.
Yeah, and then vanish. And I think that's really tight too, is that you don't know that the first scene and the last scene are the same. So that's why all those scenes, the scenes where Tonya's talking about where he's going to get the thing from the safe, and when he's playing the cards, we don't know that they've lived. So we see that they keep setting us up where he's like, any minute I could die. I'm going to be cool about it. If I die today, I'm going to be cool about it. So the fact that they get to live at the end is like just a pleasant surprise for us as the viewer.
Yeah, he actually told us that from the very start. We just didn't know it. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
There was only one moment this entire film that felt like, is that really what would happen? And that was when, they talk about the doctor saying, oh, we found this in your dog. Would the doctor really have had that?
I like your cynical mind, Tonya. Yeah.
What a good veterinarian,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because there's no way he sees those two guys and thinks, you guys misplaced an 86-carat diamond. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. The jackets are pretty sharp, I think, I think that I love what all you guys said. I think for me, the biggest evolution that I can see in him between the first film and this is his reaction to other actors. I think in this film, you can see, and actually most of the time it's by not doing anything. Actually, when Bricktop's like aggressively talking at him, or when that scene you were just talking about, Tony, when Mickey's like, you've got nothing to be sorry for. I think an actor could choose to try to do too much in those moments, and what he does is very little, if almost nothing, because that's, as you said, Tonya, it's within his character to be that way, to be cool, calm, and collected, to be thinking about things and processing it. And
that said, stillness is difficult to master.
I was just about to say, I'm not an actor, but I imagine
that could be directing too. But
sure,
the fact that he took the direction.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything in the trivia that suggested, man, he really had a hard time not overreacting to everything that was said to him.
Yeah. Which is one of the things which was the opposite of Vinnie Jones, which was like, please keep telling me what to do. Please keep telling me what to do. And I imagine with the relationship Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham have got, he was the same.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's so good.
Ritchie's an interesting. Sorry, Tony.
No, I was just going to say, it's just so good. Like, it's just such a great. I mean, even if this isn't your kind of movie, and I can see why a lot of people would hate this movie. For all.
I don't know. This movie's a piece of art.
It is. It really is.
I say that as a feminist, where this does not pass the Bechdel test. Okay, not even close. But it's still a great movie.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Jack. Sorry.
No, not at all. I was just going to talk, like, I think, we were segueing quite nicely into talking about Guy Ritchie as well, because Tonya, you were saying, like, that you keep coming back to it, and I'm pleased you do, about, like, a lot of this is in the direction. It's in the writing that he did in the script, which is his, and then it's in the direction. And I think he's a really interesting character. When you hear him talk about this movie, he almost describes it as like lock, stock, leftovers. Like, I had some scenes and some characters left over that I couldn't fit into Lock, Stock. So I thought, I'll just put them into a new movie. It only took me 3 months to write. And part of that could come off as, kind of an arrogance of like, oh, this is easy for me. But it doesn't. When you hear him talk about it, it almost comes off as like he's talking about himself. He's kind of self-depreciating, I suppose, to an extent.
So like he's acknowledging that. I mean, he's not saying it was easy. He's saying the reason it took 3 months. Like, I mean, I'm assuming he spent his whole life writing Lock, Stock. You know, and it's like this is clearly in the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
as that, and I appreciate that. I mean, using the same actors. I mean, you know, and again, the comparison with Tarantino, that they're all in the same universe, right? Like, you know, that they talk in Reservoir Dogs. They talk about Alabama from True Romance. Like, she comes up, Harvey Keitel's character mentions Alabama. So you're like, it's a shared universe, even though even the same actors are in the different movies playing different people. So you can believe that where Lock, Stock is happening across town, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why.
Yeah, I love that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought of him as cocky. I've always thought of Guy Ritchie as
yeah, neither of
a guy who people want to hate him because he's got a punchable face. But like, you know what I mean? I don't mean that literally. But like, he's just that kind of guy. You're like, oh, that guy, another one of those guys. But he's talented. It's clear. Look what he does with this cat. Look at the people who want to work with him. I mean, if the people who discovered him are like, he's got something there. So it's not, I didn't bother to see Aladdin, nor will I ever. So I can't promise. And I know not every movie of his is a hit. But I think he's never been accused of not trying something, not going for it. I've never seen him phone something like, and all the movies of his I've seen, which are not all of them, admittedly, but I've never seen even his bad movies. He didn't phone it in. He's like, well, I see what you were trying to do there. And so while you can say this is a bloody movie about, violence, swearing, and all this other stuff, but like Time Sits Work Hard, it's a story about friendships. Ultimately, this is a story about like having, like, there's a lesson in all of his pictures. I find there's always a heart. The ones I've seen, there's a heart there. Even the one that you hate, Jack, even his King Arthur isn't. There's still listen. But at the heart of it, and I know he didn't write that one, but at the heart of it, he's still trying to tell like a character-driven story. And while the plot, that's why you said at the beginning, what's the plot? Well, it's hard to tell us what the plot is because it's not about that.
This is definitely a character-driven
story.
And
I love that. I want that.
Like the plot is irrelevant,
Yeah.
It's there's a diamond and a bunch of stuff happens. However, this guy and this guy and this guy and this trio and these fools and and then the music. And the music is also a huge part of it.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, Tonya, because I know that was one of the key reasons why you wanted to come on to talk about the movie.
There are just songs from that have stuck with me since the first time I watched it. Things that are on my playlist, it's like that. It's not the first song, but it's the second song. I always thought it was the first song. To me, it was the first song, but the song Diamond by Glint, it is just so good. It just sets the tone for the movie. But then you have all these other moments, like when the caravan is burning. There's a very serious.
That's massive attack, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it was so good. It's like the musical choices were spot on with this. Nothing felt like a throwaway choice. It wasn't like, a song like this. No, it had to be this song. They all felt like the song it had to be for this. And I think that's a huge part of storytelling. And sometimes you can't get the song you need. I'm glad that they did for this one.
And I think it's another era where he came into those comparisons with Tarantino as well for his eclectic soundtracks. When they were released here, I don't know about in the States, when they released here, they were released with like snippets of dialogue from the movie as well, which all the Tarantino soundtracks were back in the day too. So that's definitely And were you discovering these songs because of the film?
I can't think of any that I knew ahead of this film.
I love that.
I'm pretty sure they were all because of the film. And so it's not like, I recognize that song. It's like, this is good. I can't wait to look up the track list when I'm done with this movie. And it's like, I like that. I love this. Like, there are so many good songs. Some just, you know what? I knew Lucky Star.
Of course. Yeah.
I knew the Madonna song. That one I didn't have to look up. But the rest of them were just so good. And it's not like it's all one kind of music. It wasn't just music you would expect to find in this kind of area in England, it's like all over the place, but it was suitable. And I don't think he was responsible for that. I'm sure he had some. I didn't look up who did the soundtrack, but when you have a great team, it makes magic. The whole thing makes magic.
I agree. It's funny, as I'm watching, Lee and I are watching the Alex Rider TV series. Finally, we're getting around to that. We'd read the books and whatever. And the soundtrack in that, actually, the sound mixing is terrible, by the way, which it's funny. It's fun to watch a movie like back, when everything was pre-digital everything. So it's like, oh, we mixed the sound in better. So like, there's a lot of sound in this that doesn't blow your ears out. Like all of a sudden it's not going up 700 octaves or decibels to like play the song. But that's the problem with that, Alex. But I really like the music choices that they're using, but it's also like, what's cool at the time we've made this show? What is something this 16-year-old kid would listen to? Let's get that song, as opposed to let's find the right mood song for that. And I think so it is the difference being like, and again, the soundtrack for that show is really good, but it's also going to be a time capsule. Like in 20 years, people are going to go like, oh, what was the soundtrack for Alex Rider season 1? Oh, that checks out. That's exactly what people were listening to in 2019. Where the right choice of music can make it a time. And again, this is, there are cell phones, whenever, but it's pre-smartphone, and a good soundtrack can wipe some of the technology out, because you're like the music sets it in a place and time on its own. Like you said, Tonya, with it being an eclectic soundtrack, well, when the fuck is this? And who are these people? And it says a lot about
So and where, because it's not all. I don't think it's all English music.
No.
Well, Madonna's not, although she does speak with a British accent now.
Well, obviously that one, but no, I think there were definitely others that felt very American.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think it's a smart choice to do. I think directors. I know that, like you said, Tonya, the director doesn't choose all the music, but they can decide if there's something they're specifically looking for. I remember Ben Stiller talking about in the
they can veto for sure.
Yeah, in Reality Bites, he wrote it. He got the permission from Frampton to do "Baby I Love Your Way" in the movie, and then the film producers were like, "We want to do this remake, this reggae version." He's like, "Nah," and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to use it." And he's like, "I don't want to use it." And they argued, and so the deal was he got to use the original in the movie, but then they put the remake on the soundtrack. That was his concession. He's like, "Fine, I don't care. I'm not sticking that garbage into my movie." But it was like a big fight. It was a big fight. He's like, I got Peter Frampton to say, yes, I get to use the song. He wrote a whole scene for that song in Reality Bites because it was so important to like.
You can't use the wrong version of the song.
Right. It doesn't work because you're learning about the character. Right. And he's like, it's a shorthand for us to understand who he used to be as opposed to this yuppie guy that he is now. It was important. They're like, no, let's use this reggae guy. He's like, but he's not that guy. Like, that's who he becomes, but that's not who he was.
And it can be very distracting when you have a cover of a song playing, because now you're like, this is familiar, but I don't know why. And you're thinking about that instead of what's happening on screen.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very particular about covers. I don't usually love them.
Because you're attached to the original.
I have this restaurant and I love the restaurant food, but their constant music is, I think they have a station of bad covers. It's not just covers. They are ridiculously bad covers. And I cannot understand why anyone would choose to play this. It's just so bad. It's criminally bad. Okay.
Well, that's too bad, because I do like a good cover. I love Postmodern Jukebox. I think is the world's greatest cover band, and they do some amazing stuff. But of course, they're not doing straight covers. That's the point of them, is they're taking them in. We didn't mean to turn this into the cover band show, Jack.
Yeah,
sorry.
But don't you have a story that you have not yet shared?
Oh,
yes,
I do.
We need to get there.
Sure, yes, as we're running slowly out of time. Sorry about that.
So,
my technical.
Come on, Tony, Farina, tell us your story.
Well, okay, so yes, the thing about Snatch, and again, I didn't realize this until this current watch, is that there's also somebody whose last name is Beckwith, who plays Errol, which is my wife's last name, is Beckwith. So again, bizarro Superman. But so Dennis Farina and I are, well, he's no longer with us in the world, but so I never met him. My father knew him like in passing, not like they were friends. But so I had an aunt, a great aunt, who's really probably like a cousin, but you know how it is, like in families when there's like an old lady who's in charge of your life, she's an aunt, right? That's just how it is. You don't think of her what she really is. She was probably a cousin, but anyway, so we were really, really close with her, and her name was Frances Washbush, but she actually went by Toots because that's what old Italian ladies are called, Toots. So she was from Chicago, and she actually was Dennis's babysitter so she would always see him on things when he became an actor. And she would be like, oh, I remember when Denny was blah, blah, blah. And she would always talk about little Denny this, little Denny that. And he actually became an actor accidentally because he was a police officer in the city of Chicago, and he started doing security. They would hire police officers to do security on film sets. And so Michael Mann hired him to do security on a film set, and then that's how it worked. So Michael Mann discovered him because he's like, hey, you want to do something? And then he gave him his own show, Crime Story, and everything. So that is my closest distant blood relative who's also an actor, Dennis Farina. So we are slightly related to Dennis. So that is my remote claim to fame, that I never knew the man, but my dad did meet him. And somebody I know very well said he was just such a silly little boy, and he used to go by Denny, which is funny because then he's like, Dennis Farina, he's like that guy, like in fucking Midnight Run, he's this guy, like the guy he is here and the guy he is in Midnight Run are the same guy, And so it's just always funny to think that, he was an accidental actor too. But you could actually see, if you ever wanted to do a back to filmography of him, you can definitely see him, even though he always kind of plays the same guy, you can see him getting so much better from like, where would you like me to look? Don't look at the camera, Dennis. To like in this, you can tell how much fun he's having in this movie. Like he's having a blast. So that is and then again, I didn't realize until I was looking at the cast list that yes, that the guy who plays Errol's last name is Beckwith, which is my wife's name. So apparently I'll have to ask her. I'm sure she's like, who now? Beckwith is a pretty common name. So anyway, that is my story. That is why I was excited that when you were like, oh, I mean, in addition to just loving the film. So that was probably why I thought, like we would seek out his film, So I am sure he was the reason I saw this in the first place. It was like, oh, Dennis is in this. He's playing himself. He's playing the mob guy. He either played a cop or he played a mob guy. So it's funny. Those were his two extremes. So that is my almost famous story. But you, Tonya, said you almost met Statham. So like yours is better.
I don't know. You were related, and I chose not to for all the wrong reasons.
All the right reasons. No way. Yeah, all the right reasons.
Maybe the right reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just did not want to be part of the entourage.
Yeah, totally fair.
I wanted my boss to respect me, and if I went to that thing, I would be with a group of girls I didn't respect. So
yeah, that's totally fair.
I do believe I made the right call.
Yeah, I agree. You did. So yes, that is my Dennis Farina is sort of related to me story.
That boss is sort of the reason I'm an actor.
See, it all works out.
Oddly enough, too bad I didn't come to that conclusion when he was still, meeting these people.
It could have been you in The Expendables, not Chris Carpenter.
See?
Was that so terrible, though?
No, I think you dodged a bullet there. All right, we've got a couple of things, if we can, to wrap up before I let you go, Tonya. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I want to play a little game with you both. How many times do you think the word fuck is said in this film?
Ooh. That is interesting because I like to do a Monday movie quote. And I went and searched for which one I was going to use. And I don't like to cuss on my Twitter. And it was like,
very limited.
There goes that one. There goes that one. There goes that one. And, I don't think about it because I don't have a problem with cussing. So it's not something that stuck in my head as being a bunch of cuss words, but when I went to go copy and paste it, it's like, that's not really who I am. So I would say hundreds, like probably 300 times.
Okay, interesting.
I would,
in a 90-ish minute movie, so we're looking at what, three a minute? I'm not good at math.
There were a lot.
Yeah, fair enough. Tony?
7.
But math is hard, Jack. Don't make me do math.
No, I don't. Yeah, I am not here criticizing anybody's maths. Don't get me.
No, the number that popped in my head was 77. That's what I'm going to go with.
Oh,
77.
Very different. We've got opposite ends of the scale. To be fair, we go in the middle of you both. 163 according to the trivia.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So less than
Which
Scarface.
is obviously still like less than Scarface, but still more than one per minute, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I want to do for this show, just to finish off, before I get your final opinion on the rating system, I started in the last episode, and I want to continue using Letterboxd. I don't know if that's something you're familiar with, or you both use, or I think what it does is I'm not a big believer in Rotten Tomatoes. and I don't want to cite specific kind of critics as such. I think this is a nice middle ground. It is, if you scroll through enough, you get past the people who are trying to be glib and funny and trying to become get their own little corner of fame from it, and actually just get real fans talking about films from their perspective. So I trawled through hundreds and hundreds of reviews, and what I'm trying to do is find ones where they're talking about the Stath more specifically. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share a couple of those now.
Yes.
So we have Danny B. While I don't think I'll ever be able to love Snatch as much as I did when I was a kid at this point, I still enjoy this a hell of a lot. It's Guy Ritchie's best film by an absolute mile in a very spotty, albeit entertaining career. I kind of miss Jason Statham doing more reserved roles like this before becoming an action star, playing the same role in every film. Although I'm not complaining too much, as Statham action films can be damn good. So I thought that really is that's nice. That summed up what we've said a lot of tonight, which I think is interesting.
Very much so.
Yeah. I echo. I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, I like this thing. When I saw the trailer for the Meg, I'm like sold. So like I don't rue that he doesn't do those. Like I like those. I mean, so that's all. I would disagree with.
No,
Danny.
I'm just agreeing that it touches on what we were saying.
Yeah, I do.
There was a
totally
definite
agree.
shift.
Yeah, 100%.
There was a conscious decision on his part to start making a different type of career move.
Correct.
Definitely.
But it's probably a lot more profitable.
Definitely. Getting in those Fast and Furious movies, good move.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, I've just got a couple more. So Justin Peterson, he says, writer and director Guy Ritchie compiled one hell of a zany gang of hilarious misfits in his stylish crime masterpiece, Snatch. This was the first time I recall seeing Jason Statham in a movie, and I still think this is his best role as Turkish. It helps bring us into the story as the narrator. So again, playing that straight guy. I think it's interesting that people have obviously clamoring for a little bit more of this kind of role from Jason Statham. And then Chris FT says, in this film, Jason Statham does his best character acting, sans gimmicky stunts, something I'd love to see more of from him.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's kind of this clamor. I think people maybe are finding these later on, knowing the Statham for something else, and wanting to see a bit more of this from him.
I bet it would be different if you saw him as an action star first, and then you see this, and you're like, damn, he can act, Because he doesn't really have to act for some of the action roles. He just needs to look cool and tough.
Which he does look cool and tough.
He does.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, and he does all of those. He does that very well. No, and I get it. It's like, it's the choice. It's funny. Stallone did the same thing, right? Stallone made a choice to not show. I mean, when you see Nighthawk, you're like, motherfucker. And even the original Rocky, he's acting his balls off. And,
right.
And it's like, but he made a choice. He could be like,
he's a smart guy, but he does not look like one.
Oh my God.
You don't expect that on screen.
Genius. And that's the thing. He knew, he's like, okay. I mean, because that original Rambo isn't what the rest of the Rambo movies are. The original Rambo is called First Blood. It's not the same thing.
First Blood, yeah.
So it's like those movies that launched the tent poles were all totally different for him. And so then he's just like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to be the guy who makes the Expendables. And again, that was his idea. That was his brainchild because he's a genius. But I think Statham, I mean, they're friends. And Statham obviously saw, he's like, well, I can go this way and work my ass off and do like dramatic, gritty roles that are all indie movies, or I could go and make a shit ton of money and then occasionally show up in Wrath of Man, or occasionally show up in Spy and show everybody what I can do.
Yeah, Spy's a good one.
Right. Make this much money and be able to work in whatever kind of film I
because,
want, because I don't have to worry about paying my bills.
Right, because Stallone's Copland is genius. I mean, what a performance, right? And so it's like, I think he saw that. I think it's a shrewd move, and you can say what you want, but he's smarter than we are. I think Statham is. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, you know what I mean? Like, he's smarter than, not us, but like the
yeah, no judgment.
No, you know what I mean?
No judgment
exactly.
at all.
The people who are giving him grief are like, well, no. I think he did. So I hear that, but I think I totally am down with what he did. So
I do think it's a difference of perspective, though. If you saw him in his earlier movies first, and then he makes a shift, and you're like, oh, well done. But if you see him in these action things, and then you're like, oh, he gave up doing this for that, as someone who's just receiving the entertainment value, I can see why they would have thoughts in that area.
Sure.
But I don't judge him because he's doing what's best for him.
I think he is loving life. So long may it continue, to be honest.
Agreed.
So in terms of this film, in terms of his performance in it, what do we think? I've got a 3-scale system. I want you to tell me whether you think this is a classic from amongst his filmography, whether you think it's one that's worth catching, or whether you think it's for completists only.
I think it's classic.
Yeah? So it's one that everyone should watch.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's a classic. It's a classic all the way down, all the way.
Mm-hmm. For the film and for his performance and...
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So that means this guy, in his first 2 films, has made 2 classics.
Yeah. You agree, classic?
Not a bad
Jack?
start.
I will agree with that. But you do need to see them in order because you don't want to go backwards on this one. Like, oh, wait, this one is a lot tighter.
Yeah. The growth here is, I think the word I've been using is formidable. I think the difference between who he was in Lock, Stock to here is it's almost like a different person.
Yeah. And he's worked hard and his confidence has grown. So
yeah,
it shows. Yeah, absolutely. Classic.
And it's deserved.
Absolutely.
Bro. All right, guys. Well, then, thank you very much for coming on the show. Let's wrap up here. I really appreciate you providing your time and your unique perspective. Tonya, would you like to go first and let people know where they can find you online and what they can expect from you in the near future?
That's funny because you say Tony and Tonya almost exactly the same. I'm just going to assume you said me because I'm the girl and you're a gentleman. I am Ms. Tonya Todd. You can find me across social media at Ms. Tonya Todd, and my website is mstonyatodd.com. You can also find me on IMDb. Not quite in a movie with the Stath yet, but I'm working on it.
You are in a film with Michael Madsen, which we could 6 degrees of separation our way to the States.
Yeah, let's work on that.
Okay. Yeah. That's exciting. When does that Michael Madsen vampire movie come out? When do I get to see that?
That is a very good question.
I've
I've done my job. I can't do anything more than that.
Fair enough.
Maybe if we get enough people watching your show to start, hassling the producers. When is this coming out? When are we getting the premiere? When is this happening? It says this on your website. Why hasn't it come out yet? Let's start on that, Tony.
You got it. I want to see it. I'm in the plan on buying it when it comes out. So tell them that's one sale. And
all I've seen is the updated trailer. That's all I have, which I don't think I sent you the updated one.
No, I would like that though, for sure. Yeah.
I'll send it your way.
You've got 2 fans here. We're all in.
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2 is better than 0.
I'm sure there's many more, but just happens to be 2 of us in this call.
Yes.
Tony, sir, from you?
You can go to, I've got a website, arfarina.com. That's where my stuff is. I have left the social medias for my own personal reasons. But I am a supporter of my friends. You should follow them on the social medias. And but I'm on the Comics in Motion Network and the Pop Gorillas, and so you can just find me around those places doing stuff. And probably by the time this comes out, we will have just completed our Friday the 13th Mayhem month on Pop Gorillas, because we hate each other apparently, and we've decided let's hate each other and make each other watch these awful movies. But it's been fun, so that's where I am. So thanks for having me on. I'm very excited about this new project. I can't wait to hear it as it goes.
I think we'll be deep in the midst. So I think 2 weeks' time we'll be right in the midst of so this will be a welcome relief amongst the Friday the 13th, maybe a bit of a break for everyone, for their sanity.
Those were not made as art. Those were made as camp.
Thank you everyone for listening and partaking in this journey with me through the Stath's filmography. I'm Jack's Musings, and just because for some reason me and my sister like to make our lives complicated, I'm going to have to spell that out. That's JACS. And you can also find me on Twitter, where I am most active. You can also contact the show directly on Twitter under the name Back to the Film Og. Please make sure with any interactions you use the hashtag follow the filmography. This show has been presented to you by the Pop Gorillas, a collection of hive minds who provide spoiler-free reviews of anything from pop culture in less time than it takes to listen to a song. I'm also a proud member of the Comics in Motion family, a super place full of the world's greatest people, dedicated to bringing you podcasts on a variety of geeky topics. So please make sure you take the time to search, subscribe, and rate our shows whenever and wherever you listen. Until next time, be excellent to each other and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers. Cut.